Hello there, I'm Nathalia Melo, your unfiltered fit BFF, mom of two turned CEO of a fitness empire. Someone who understands the struggles of trying to stay fit, sane, and sexy, all while juggling work, life, and motherhood. And this is the Unfiltered Fit Life podcast. Follow along wherever you're listening and join me weekly as I help busy working moms just like you simplify their fitness journey so they can lose weight, regain their confidence, and feel sexy AF. It's time to stop living in the what ifs and hiding from the cameras. It's time to regain control over your body, feel sexy naked, and wear a bikini confidently. People already see you as a super confident woman, but it's time for you to feel the same way too. Let's go. Hello there, fam. Welcome to another episode of the Unfiltered Fit Life podcast. I'm Nathalia Melo, your host. And today I have a good friend of mine that I have been asking him to be on my podcast, but he's, kind of like a celebrity out there in the athletic world. So I had to fight all these Olympic athletes so I could get him here. Coach Cav, welcome. I'm going to do a little introduction about you, but welcome.
Thank you for having me. I don't know about fighting. Anyone that's met you doesn't know that they don't have much of a chance in a lot of fighting.
That's funny. Well, let me tell a little bit, our listeners a little bit about who you are. So Justin is a highly accomplished coach with over 20 years of experience in the sports industry. He has worked with top athletes such as the second fastest man in history, Johan Blake. He's also the head Olympic coach for Jason Rogers and a USA coach for 4 times medalist from the Tokyo Games, Nick Mayhug. As the CEO of Athlete HQ, Justin developed the athlete-centric model, and that emphasizes the complete athlete, mind, body, spirit. He's also an author of the #1 best-selling book, Men Up, The 5 Areas of Athletic Success. That is quite a resume. That's bougie as hell.
It gets that way after you do the same thing for 20 years, right? And then what you do is you just eliminate all the crap and all the failures, and then you just write about the stuff that everyone likes to hear. That's what I do, right? I'm sure you know all the bar stories, right? No one goes up to the bar and goes tries to pick up the hot bartender and says, "Let me tell you about the real me."
Do be facts, man. So it's funny. I'm going to tell real quick here the story on how I met you, Cav, because I think it's like when you see your type of people. We were both at Raise the Bar event attending. I was hanging out and we just hit it off and start chatting. I had no idea who you were. You had no idea who the hell I was. And we just start chatting. You used to live in Miami. I used to live in Fort Lauderdale. And I'll be forever grateful for you. I want to say this to the publics because I had done a lot of seminars around the world. You didn't know that. You had never heard me speak. And you invited me to be the speaker in a big event for Coach Catalyst, which that was a pretty freaking big gamble for you because, you had never heard me speak. I told you, but there's so much bullshit out there. And you were like, "Hey, do you want to speak?" And I'm like, that's bold. So thank you.
Well, first of all, I appreciate, you saying that. I think all too often we live in a world where people hold those things on and then people pass us by, whether it be the windows of what they're in our lives or the fact that they're no longer here. So I really appreciate that. I'll also say that, one of my knacks in my career, why I've had a lot of success is my ability to identify talent, right? Maybe it'd just be the fact that, we identify people that look good versus the people that are actually really good. But my ability to filter has been one of my greatest skills and filtering BS, right? A lot of people in the industry has basically said, "Hey, Cav's my bullshit meter," where it's they like somebody and I'm basically the person that ruins people's birthday parties by telling them yeah, that guy's full of shit. That's me. They're like, "Oh, I love him. He's the best." And I'm like, "Well, let me, do you really want to know?" Sometimes you don't want to know. But when I met you, it was just at the end of the day, you handle yourself like a professional. You look the part. And I think what happens is number one, there's a difference between dressing to impress versus dressing to be respected based upon how you want to be perceived. And I think what you do is you hold yourself a certain way, not just from the clothes you wear, the way that you take care of yourself, but what you are not going to allow into your life. And what you aren't going to allow into your life is a lot of bullshit. That's just literally kind of your MO. And I felt that pretty quickly. And then it just so happened that you knew one of my really good friends. And I'm like, okay, now all of a sudden this is going to work out, right? I was like, at an event, and then you mentioned Ryan, and I'm like, Ryan? Ryan happens to be one of my good friends. We're going to have a good time.
I love that. I love Ryan. Ryan's a legend. Still work with him. So, Kev, enough about me. I appreciate that, but today is about you, not about me. So, can you tell us a little bit more on how your journey into becoming a coach begun? Like, how did you were like, you know what, I'm going to do that?
Sure. Yeah. So, there's actually like a drawing of me when I was like in, I think, first or second grade. My mom kept it, which is like, what do you want to do when you grow up? And you draw your hero, you draw what you want to do. And there's a picture of me with a whistle and a hat. So, talk about like, oh, destiny, it was there. However, how I got to where I am today versus how I thought I would is a very different story than what I envisioned when I was younger. I always thought that, I would take my career as an athlete. I was a 5-sport athlete. I was an All-American. I had a lot of success down in Miami, and then I worked my way all the way up to college. I thought I was going to, be the All-American, go on, play pro, make millions of dollars, retire, and then be a philanthropist. I would be Iron Man in the world of sports, right? And I thought it was going to be great. I was going to enjoy the life, the cars, the mansions, and have a good time. I think God has a different plan. Early in my career, before it even really got started, I fell through a roof, 25 feet, broke my back, L4, L5, T1. Probably one of the most humbling moments of my life is as a 19-year-old kid who, thinks he's Superman and pretty much unstoppable, having to have your dad pick your ass up to take you to the bathroom because you're going to pee on yourself. Oof. That's a pretty humbling experience, knowing that the day before I was flipping tires and throwing people around for fun. And it's pretty humbling when you can't even pick yourself up. So that's kind of how I fast-tracked my coaching career. The truth behind that, and that's a nice story. The truth behind that is I wanted to go back and play. So I fought pretty hard to actually get my ass back in shape. And I fought for about 6 months to start walking again, because it was about 3.5 months where I couldn't even walk. And then about 6 months I was about to compete, and I was like starting to train really hard. And then about a year in, I was like, all right, I'm going to get back on the field. And then my back went out again, and it was like you just didn't have it anymore. And when your body, it fails you. When your body fails you, when you push through it, and no matter what, you run yourself into a wall. There's lessons in that, right? Because I was at the point where like I believe that perseverance and determination pretty much could get you anything. Yep. But you do realize that, I think God has different timing for you. And at that point, I was going to get myself really hurt, right? To the point where I was already hurt, but I was like not listening. So I became very stubborn. Probably still am, but I'm a little bit better, but I was really stubborn, and I went against everyone's guidance, doctors, family, people that I trusted. And I said, you know what? Number one, you're not going to tell me I'm not going to walk. And number two, I'd rather be dead than in a wheelchair. And I don't think that those things are true today, but at the youth that I was in, I think that they were true at that time. Okay. I think you go through certain stages where your perspective's off. So that's how I got started. And then in the coaching space, I got forced into it. Friends of mine that were also very successful as athletes when we were younger, they said, hey, I trust you. So you're training me. I'm like, I don't even know what I'm doing. So it's not fake it till you make it. It's don't fuck it up is what it is. Because I was granted the opportunity to work with people that are at a high level that their entire lives are on. Yeah. And I didn't have the expertise at the time. So when you get forced in that role and your friend, someone who trusts you says, hey, we're going to do this, you better figure it out. So that was my world. It was like, hey, if everything rises and falls on trust, don't mess this up. That was kind of the model that I had.
Were these friends of yours that asked you to coach them, were they pro athletes, or they were, on the cusp of becoming pro athletes, and then pro athletes start to see you? So how did that transition into professional athletes happen?
Yeah. So, where I grew up in the area of South Florida, Miami, sports are a very competitive landscape. And we kind of hung out together, the guys that wanted it, because there wasn't a lot, right? A lot of people were doing other things, and they went on to college. They went on to do probably dumb stuff. And the opportunities were endless in that regard. And we wanted to use sports as our avenue to get to where we wanted to be. And for me, it was very simple. That's what we were doing. So we were already on that path. Some of us made it, some of us didn't, right? And we could talk about it until we're blue in the face, like I could have been something. But the reality is I didn't, and someone else did. And the ones that did trusted me with their help along the journey. And that's what happened.
And it's funny that you said the area that I'm from, they were doing dumb shit. Yes, I know where you're from in South Florida, and they definitely were doing dumb shit. There's a lot of dumb shit that goes around there. And Cav, are your parents immigrants?
Yeah, my dad's from my dad's father's from Ireland, from Dublin. My dad's mom is from Puerto Rico, so Spanish English speaking phone. My mom's from Cuba, born and raised in Hialeah, so that might as well be Little Cuba too.
Yeah, raised by a Cuban mom. There is a guy on TikTok, Marcelo. He's actually on. He's become very big now. His mom is Cuban, and he has a skit that is saying that whenever your mom escapes communism, she doesn't let you forget about it. Was that your experience?
You have to dodge chancletas and spatulas for sure, no doubt.
I love that. And do you find that had a influence? The immigrant kind of mindset from your parents that had an impact on resilience, on the work ethic and things like that.
I think it was something that I saw every day. So there weren't a lot of stories of like where we're from and what we did to do this for you. It was just a kind of reality. So for instance, like where I live right now in Reston, Virginia, if a door slams too hard, you're like spooked because it's such a nice area. Like we live in a very affluent area. My office is, above me is the Google building, and then Rolls Royce is my neighbor as far as our facility. So that's a pretty good group of people from a business relationship standpoint. And it's a very different environment than where I grew up. Now, you don't know if you grew up in a rough area or not. It just becomes your neighborhood. So I had a saying that my dad would say all the time, and I kind of say it to myself to remind me of like what it's like. It's like he would always say, want what you have so you have what you want. Ooh. And the people only feel a certain way when you look at other people's stuff. And when you start just saying like, hey, what do you like your interest? Is it being so persuaded by what other people have or they say their life is life? Because you don't want what other people have. You really need to learn to want what you already have so that you'll learn to appreciate it. So there wasn't stories growing up. Although I will say my grandmother, who passed at 98, was the oldest of 22 brothers and sisters from Cuba, would say she would sweep our floor, and I would kind of grab the brush from her when I was little and try to help. That was like kind of art, like when I was like a little bit. And it was funny because she'd be like, number one, you're doing it wrong. And number two, she liked doing it. And it was also a sense of pride because for her, she's like, I used to sweep the floors of the house that didn't have floor because it was just dirt.
Yeah.
And here we are with like such like lack of appreciation and lack of gratitude for the things that we are standard living, right? But I do believe part of the reason for that is that my parents never let me feel like what they were giving me was so different than what they had. They just basically wanted me to start a certain way. And they didn't run the traditional immigrant edge mentality where they would say, we didn't have it this way. We walked 6 miles backwards up the hill both ways on our hands in the snow in Miami. Like my dad was like, so like you talk about like the bullshit years, like my parents called me out on a regular basis. So I joke around about like, I tell stories. It's a lot of fun and I like to like exaggerate that stuff. But the truth of it is my parents were very keen on being real with me and having the feedback loop be very, very tight. So when we screwed up, they told us right away. And they never really compared it like, oh, you should be so lucky because when I was younger, this is what we had. They basically just said, this is what you have. And the comparison is the biggest thing that you are going to be running into as a problem in your life. So we're not going to compare you what you have to what we had.
I love that.
And it was a very different thought process to the way I hear people now talking about, well, my parents would always kind of remind me of this stuff. Like the reminder was every day there was like we had what we had.
Yeah, no, I love that. Which then kind of brings me to my next question, because it can be upbringing. I don't know, but what have you seen in the pro athletes, Olympic athletes that you work with, that sets them apart from other people? And I'm not talking just about the talent and skills. What are other characteristics from the thousands of athletes, professional athletes, high level athletes? What sets them apart?
They don't believe what anyone says, the good or the bad. They don't believe what anyone that's outside of their circle of trust tells them. If someone tells them they suck, they don't care. If someone tells them they're the greatest, they don't care. And this is true, by the way, not just for Olympians or pro athletes, but high level executives that are very successful. They are very hard on themselves, and at the same time, they're very forgiving. Meaning that when they make one mistake, they get quickly depressed, they get down on themselves. They're not like rock solid. Everyone's like, man, nothing affects me. Like, that's all bullshit. They really get down really, really bad. It affects them, but they do it in closed doors. And then within a split second, they're back to basically saying, hey, I'm a king of the world. Let's go. Okay. And they do it really, really quickly. They almost have like amnesia where they're really, really depressed for 5 seconds and then they let it go because they know that that's not a good place for them to stay in. And then they start getting out of it. They truly believe that the only way out is through, and that's by moving. When people stay still, they fail.
That is so basically what I'm hearing is their ability to, it's not that they don't see a mistake and don't experience a mistake. It's more that they know the mistake happened and they're able to recover instead of marinating or stewing on everything that has gone wrong.
Absolutely. Yeah. They're very hard on themselves. I think oftentimes people think that athletes or entrepreneurs or people that are very successful tend to be like, oh, you're not that hard on yourself because because other people that don't get over it, they're hard on themselves, but then they brew it and they stew and they marinate it, just like you said. But the truth of it is they just do it quickly. They get it over it very fast. So they basically say, gosh, I'm such an idiot. I can't believe this happened. It sucks, blah, 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 blah. And then they basically say, okay, well, this isn't helping me. Let's go. And then they get over it right away. And then they forget about it. It's like it didn't happen. I'll get up to the track and I'm like, guys, you gotta pick up the pace, man. You're moving fast. Let's freaking go. What's going on today? Like, you gotta chop. And they'll look at me and they go, coach, don't rush greatness.
Ooh, that's powerful.
Because they control their own tempo.
Oh, that's powerful.
They'll look at me and they're like, you can't rush greatness, coach. And they'll look at me and they're like, they're controlling even the tempo that I'm setting. Oof. Because they know themselves so well. They're like, nope, I'm going to take it down. And then if they know they're dragging ass and they have to pick it up, they'll give me the look and like, oh,
that's funny.
But if they know that they need to control the pace, they don't let anyone else control their pace.
One thing that working with more general population, all high achievers, but not professional athletes. We have some former professional athletes, but one of the biggest, quote unquote, I'm doing air quotes, fights that I have is that people are always looking for novelty, or they're, but I get bored and I get bored and I get bored. How do you see your athletes dealing with boredom? And why is boredom important?
Interesting question, because the most successful athletes have basically embraced the most boring process, because the consistency is where you win. For instance, I'll give you an example. I love food. You want to take me, you want to have a good conversation? We're going to go out to eat. Like, it doesn't matter where we go. 90% of what I do in work is going to be dictated on the weather, because I don't like the cold, and good food. And I want to make sure we have a good meal. So if I find that interesting, because when I have a specific goal, I eat the same thing pretty much every day. Mm-hmm. My athletes look at food purely as a utility. They don't look at it as enjoyment. They understand it's there to do a job. It's there to fuel them, and it's there to recover them. It has no other purpose. They don't care what it tastes like. So that's a very different way of approaching things, especially for me, who I'm an emotional eater. I enjoy food, and I also feel like dessert is, in my family, dessert was the way that we talked, right? So we cracked open the ice cream, we cracked open the baked goods, and that was our conversation piece. And when it comes to performance, high performers, they embrace the boring. Mm-hmm. Just like the hard times they understand that they're getting better, but that's not always fun. Like, you wake up and you're sore the next day. If you don't work through that, it's going to just be sore again by the time you let that rest. Mm-hmm. You got to learn to work through the pain, just like you got to get over the boring. Mm-hmm. And if you don't do that, you'll stay there in a long time. You'll never make progress.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So let me ask you this, because although you work with a lot of like Olympic athletes, professional athletes, I know that you also work with high achievers, CEOs, C-suite men that they don't necessarily understand that concept that the professional athlete has. So how do you help a C-suite executive that is going to train to, I don't know, maybe be entertained and doesn't want to be a professional athlete, and they are bored because it's the second week that they do the same workout.
Second week, good God. And they expect something different? Yeah. So before you enter into my world, I basically ask you questions that make it very clear that, like, if you want to do this, then you have to understand, like, there's a reason why we go through this process. So if I were to have you coach me on finance or business strategies, and that's where you're like, an executive in, and I was basically telling you like, well, you don't understand my business, or well, like, all arguing about this, that, and the other. And you're just like, dude, that's nonsense. Shut up. Like, you're so far below me in this world. Like, who are you to talk? This is the reason why you're coming to me for help. I don't waste time coaching the uncoachable. So if someone doesn't want to learn, what's the point? But once you're in the ecosystem and you do want to learn, then the conversation's a matter of like, how do we navigate this based on that you could have both? Like, why does it have to be either or? Why can't it be both? And it can be, just not right now. So for instance, if you're really fucking fat, you're probably going to have to cut out carbs a little bit for a certain window of time. But guess what? Once you start getting really, really lean, you can have a lot of carbs. You should still do really, really well. But you don't have to earn that, right? You got to get to the point where your body can handle managing that and digesting it. And if food is your biggest problem, we got to figure out a fast way to get you lean so that you can actually manage it. So is it, you're not going to outrun a bad diet. You can't outrun your cravings in your social hour. You're not going to be able to outwork or oversleep your alcoholic behavior. So you have to figure out like exactly what we're doing to extract stuff to then, create another, a better solution.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing. The next thing is going to be, like looking at them and just basically saying to them, if I jumped from trend to trend and fad to fad in your expertise, I would go nowhere. So what makes you think that if you jump from trend to trend and interesting thing and QVC late night products, you make your life change so quickly? What makes you think that that's going to get you the results that you want? And then the last question I ask them is, you know what? For being one of the smartest guys and the most successful guys in your space, you're pretty freaking dumb in this. So why? Are you actually dumb? Or do you just you don't want to hear what I have to say because what I have to say is actually saying you're going to have to do some hard work.
Ooh, this is so good.
And it's basically just saying to them like, hey, you're going to have to do some hard work and you don't like doing that.
I love that you mentioned about the balance, because that is a motto that we have inside the Powerhouse Academy, which is my signature program, that balance is earned. People will come to us and, they've been eating for a family of 25, going out to eat 7 days a week for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And then they're like, oh, I need balance. I'm like, your balance right now is going to Chick-fil-A 5 times a week. Like, we're going to have to take a few steps back to take a few steps forward. So I love that you mentioned that. So I'm curious, Cav, pro athletes, Olympians, they all have coaches, and you probably see a lot of this whenever you're speaking conferences or even working in gyms, speaking with colleagues, is that you have the pro athletes, the Olympians, the top athletes in the world getting coaches. And then you have somebody who has, I don't know, done something. Oh, I was, a D15 quarterback and I competed, and I was a personal trainer when I was in college. I know what to do. I don't need any help. Like, what is the first thing that comes to mind whenever I tell you a story like this, which I'm sure that you have experienced? You have the top athletes. They're like, yep, need help. And then you have somebody on Beachbody for a month being like, oh no, I totally got it.
And I'm probably the worst to ask that question because I don't do well with that group of people. I'm really not you want to say like, hey, he's really good at his job. Like, you want to know an area where I will fail in is people that don't want to have something that most people think is impossible. Like, I do well when the outcome is something that not many people could even achieve if everything was dialed in. So I like the kind of gain of impossible. And then I also like to have skin in the game where it's like my ass is on the line. Like, in order to make it, in order to win, in order to earn, then we have to win. Because I truly believe like not everything that you deserve, you earn. Like, I deserve to go to the Olympics, but you didn't earn it.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's not in the cards that year. So it happens all the time. Like you deserve to, you won the Olympia. Like you deserve to do it. Well, there's a lot of other women that put the same amount of work in that deserved it too, but they didn't earn it.
Mm-hmm.
You earn it because there's someone else out there, right? There's somebody else out there that wanted it more than you. And there's somebody else out there that just had it dialed in at that right moment. And it was right for the taking for that one person. And I don't truly believe that that's luck. That's unmade. I think that is man-made luck along with opportunities. So for the people that want to live out their glory days, stay there. But there's levels to this game, just like there's levels to training. Like if we're sitting here arguing about sets and reps and exercise selection or, motivation and mindset, like when you watch me coach, it doesn't look that impressive because sometimes I'll look at an athlete and I'll be like, hey, just go ahead and do me a favor. Just go ahead and adjust that a little bit. When you get that push, just do this. And everyone's like, that's all you do? Yeah, because for the last 20 years, all of the details were done. Like for 20 years, we did the basics, the fundamentals, the other stuff. So at this level, it's literally just the icing on the cake.
Mm-hmm.
And we stay ready. We don't ever need to go through the get ready process. We stay ready.
Mm-hmm.
And that's harder for people that don't have, the financial support. That's harder when they don't have like the logistical setup that makes it easy. But the ones that learn to stay ready, they don't have to get ready. When it's their time, they just like turn it on.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a big believer of there are levels to this game. And at the highest level, it's not that impressive. What's impressive is knowing what not to do.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I loved, like you said, so many things there that I'm like, yes, I'm like shaking my head like I'm going to get a whiplash here. And so imagine that you get a new athlete, like just somebody who is out of college, is still in college, trying to get drafted, for example, to the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
And then you start working with that person. And then you have an old athlete, incredibly successful. Let's say, I don't know, you're coaching a Super Bowl winner. Have you noticed that whenever like that new athlete comes through the door, they have a much a mentality oftentimes that is kind of like, oh, I know what to do, compared to the person that has been doing it for a long time and knows that they need the help and support because they acknowledge that they don't know all the things. Is that something like the people who are more at kind of quote unquote the beginner stage, they think that they have it all figured out. In the meantime, the people that are way ahead of the game, they acknowledge that they don't know everything.
Absolutely. And what I have found, right, like just in my personal experience, is that when athletes come to me earlier on in their career, I have found that most people, when they assess something that is new to them or that they're going into, they're assessing it based on the opinions of their experience in the past. So if their experience in the pro environment is 3 months, then they only have 3 months of data, and they're attaching that, like their experience with you, to 3 months of data. And if an athlete that's got 3 years in the league, they're assessing the interaction with you to 3 years. But an athlete that has 13 years, that's a Hall of Famer, that's pretty much at the tail end of their career, that's done it all and has watched the rules change, watched the culture change. They've been through all of these like political nightmares and they know how to navigate those things. They're assessing the interaction with you based upon that 13-year pro experience.
Mm-hmm.
So I understand that they don't know what they don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And the minute that I start to realize that, that's when I started to grow as a coach because it was all new. And I started taking the athlete and I go, okay, he is not ready to hear about what he's not ready to hear. What that means is simple. I need to tell him the truth, but the whole truth, he's not ready for. So I have to tell him the truth based on the stage that he's in.
Mm-hmm.
So that means I can't be conniving. That means I can't set him up for, failure. But I also think that I would be setting him up for failure if I told him everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I say, hey, this is what's going to happen. This is going to happen. Because then you almost start implanting that into their head.
Yeah.
So you still want them to go through their experiences, but you do have to tell them like, hey, here's the stage that we're in. Kind of like a map at an amusement park when you're busy, you're all over the place. Think about a kid losing his parent at Disney World. They're all over the place and they're lost. The most important thing is, where are you right now? So if you could just be the voice to that young kid, the little kid that's losing his mind, saying, hey, this is where you are right now, he may be able to calibrate the other stuff.
I love that.
I find that to be the same thing with people in their pro careers where they almost don't know where they are. They enter into this amusement park and it's like, oh my God, where do I start? And what they have to understand is like, hey, this is where you are.
Mm-hmm.
You want to get over here? This is where you are. And then you just start to visualize the path.
Mm-hmm.
And once you start making progress, just remind them, this is where you are.
Mm-hmm.
Because most people that are high achievers are horrible at celebrating success.
Stop attacking me.
This isn't about anyone. This is not a therapy session. This is just the two people talking. But what happens is 3 months in the league, their life's already changed, right?
Mm-hmm.
They've now gotten paid for their sport. They work their entire lives. They're completely in a different tax bracket than they've ever thought they were. And yet they haven't even done anything yet.
Mm-hmm.
So they're really bad at celebrating.
Mm-hmm.
And they start moving on to the next thing. They go on to the next thing. And then another year goes by. They do something great and they don't celebrate.
Mm-hmm.
So at some point, you have to remind them, look how far you've come.
Uh-huh.
Let's set new goals. Except you're not that little kid anymore that's lost. You know exactly where you are.
Uh-huh.
And the more that you could create self-awareness and reflection, the faster they will be able to get out of that like static state of uncertainty or anxiety of what do I do next? Because it's really hard to make the next move if you don't know where you are. But if you know what's coming down the pipe, you can start making some better decisions.
I love that. And I love that you mentioned the importance of celebrating, because it is definitely, I remember I won the Olympian. I'm like, next day. And I was like, well, that was a good win. Anyway, what's next? Like literally the very next day. So I can relate to that so much.
Well, I started having these conversations because this was what I struggle with, right? Like this is me. So, we're both having that conversation right now. But what I've learned is when you have deep purpose behind the work that you do, and then in order to celebrate something, there's deep meaning behind it. Anything that you go to celebrate doesn't really feel almost worthy of the celebration because you're trying to create a singular moment for years and days when you were not motivated to do the thing that you had to do to get you the results that got you the championship.
Mm-hmm.
So how do I kind of like ball that up and then put that into a moment? You can't. So I've actually found that for me and for a lot of people that I've, worked with, that superficial recognition, self-chosen, is very, very good to attach to deep work. Meaning that as a celebration, I bought myself a watch. That watch represents long standing work on a regular basis of consistency for a incredible experience, business success, things that took place, achievements in work. We went to dinner, my wife and I, we went to a really, really nice dinner. Now, every time I think about that dinner, I associate that with the man, that was actually nice to do. And it's like, I earned that. At the end of the day, like, we're very simple creatures. It's carrot and stick, right? Do we need to be motivated through achievement or be motivated to be getting our asses beat?
Yeah, I love that.
And that's one of the things I think that's good to do, which is attach something that is deep emotional and deep work to a very superficial thing. Because the superficial thing is a constant reminder. The deep work is like where the actual work is.
Yeah.
So and that normally nobody could really understand the deep work. You're by yourself. Like, in order to do deep work, it's a dark place.
Yep.
Nobody wants to talk about that.
Yeah.
Like, it sucks.
Mm-hmm. And it's lonely.
The deep work is the actual job. Yeah. So, how are you going to celebrate that by yourself and make it anything of a reminder, a meaningful thing? So, I've found that superficial things tend to actually become rewards for achievements, and they don't need to be financially excessive, but they can become, nice reminders. So, I did publish a book, but one of the reasons why I published the book was it's a legacy book, not a lead magnet book. Mm-hmm. My book was not built to drive more leads into my business. It was a book to basically close up a chapter of my life that I did for a decade that helped high school students with priorities in their life so that they could kind of take ownership of their athletic careers. I knew that I was moving on to a higher population, the 5% of the people that I were working with, that I probably wasn't going to be able to serve this other population again. So instead of it being thousands and thousands of dollars and hard to access me, I made it for $15.
Yeah.
And it became I wanted to write a story that was a part of my life. That is a reminder of the hard work that went into all of those chapters.
That's beautiful.
The way I look at it.
That's beautiful.
And it still serves that population. So there's no loss. And it's a nice reminder every once in a while.
Yeah. How do you see perfectionism? And again, I know that perfectionism is something that a lot of high achievers have. So obviously there is a value to it. But whenever you're talking about those high level people that do have these skills, they do have the guidance, how do you find that perfectionism negatively impacts your athletes? If you think that the perfectionism can negatively impact?
I think what happens when people are fighting perfectionism is they have not accepted themselves. So when people fight being perfectionists, it's because they haven't truly accepted who they are.
Mm-hmm.
Because if they accept who they are, they know that they're actually not going to be perfect.
Mm-hmm.
And once you know that, all you're doing is to try to close the gap between where you are and what perfect is, knowing that you'll never achieve it. And it's that drive to achieve something that you know you'll never get, but it's actually the reward of how close you get to the end goal. So if you think about it, if you actually said the measure of my performance is attached to the gap between me and perfectionism, how hard would I work? How fast would I get there? Most people quit because they know they're not going to achieve it, or they don't even start because they know they're not going to achieve it. I would much rather be the person that found my limit to where I ran out of gas on my way towards being perfect, understanding that I'll never hit it.
So basically what you're saying, let me see if I understood it correctly, is that there is nothing wrong with perfectionism when it's used as a tool towards greatness. However, for the person to be on the right path, they need to understand that perfection is unachievable, but they can use kind of like as the dangling carrot to push themselves farther and farther. Is that kind of what you're...
Absolutely. Like if your goal is always to be perfect, you will never start. You'll actually get to the point in life where if you have really good self-awareness and you know, like, I have to be perfect, why actually begin? Because you're never going to be perfect.
How do you navigate that with your younger athletes?
A lot of it's just like self-reflection. So for instance, I do believe that successful athletes have two traits. They know themselves really well. So they have really good awareness of who they are. So they know themselves, and then they know their role. So in team sports, they know how they interact within the dynamic. So they may be perfect, but they may not work really well with other people. Well, then you're not perfect for the dynamic. So sometimes your role doesn't mean that you have to be always 100%.
No, that's awesome. I love that. So basically is that, the perfectionism is also situation dependent, depending on the context of the situation.
Of course.
I have a paradoxical question for you right now, because that's something that I have been kind of experiencing as a business owner. Is that, in the society that we have today, everybody's a winner society and everybody feel entitled to results. And I wouldn't rephrase this that I'm not being one of like those old people that is like back in my day, but I'm seeing this. I mean, I just had a job application that I had an opening in my business. And there were people with zero experience, zero like certification, zero anything. And they wanted to make like $15,000 a month just because. So my question for you.
Good for them. Yeah.
That's ambitious. So how are you seeing because you've been doing this for a long time with younger athletes coming and being raised in a society that, is handing out trophies and everybody's a winner, but they're not willing to do the necessary work to get from A to B. How do you navigate these athletes? Because I do believe that it is a generational thing.
No doubt. And it's true for our generation compared to our parents and my parents' generation to their parents. It's going to be true in all parts of life. When you devalue the reward system by giving it to everyone else, then that reward system has no value anymore. It has no meaning. So when you give everyone a trophy, by participating, it's like giving everybody a uniform. So your reward now became the same value to us when we made the team just for the uniform.
Mm-hmm.
So at some point, you're excited to make the team. You're excited and you're proud for that uniform. That's the same level of excitement that kids now get when they get a trophy by just participating, because that was their participation. So the next level is who's the best. And the interesting thing is that this all works out. And here's how. That when you're being the last one picked, even though everyone gets a trophy, you know you're the last one picked. So if you're playing a game and we're with a group and it's like you're the captain and I'm the captain, and we start picking our teams, you go, I go, you go, I go, and then all of a sudden Johnny's the last kid picked. Johnny knows he sucks.
That's a way to put it.
The world tends to kind of flush that stuff out. We just have changed the rules by the reward being a trophy, which it just took the meaning of a trophy out of the picture.
Mm-hmm.
Now, for the people that are coming in, that person that wants a starting salary of $15,000 with no credentials and no background and no anything, my conversation to them is, great for you. You deserve that. You should go get it. You just haven't earned it. So you could go do it, just not with me.
Mm-hmm.
I have people that are in a business right now that want to, they want to do things their way. And I say, man, I'm so actually excited for you that you want to do it that way. However, you could do that your way for someone else, because when you're with me, we do it this way.
Mm-hmm.
And if you'd like to be paid by me, then you're going to have to do it our way.
Mm-hmm.
So they're more than welcome to have their $15,000 starting salary, just not in your life.
Mm-hmm.
And when you tell them that, they may have a reality check and say, man, Natalia's crazy. I'm worth $17,000 a month.
Uh-huh.
Like, she's probably not worth $17,000 a year with that attitude, but that's just the reality.
Yeah. But how, from an athletic standpoint, because that's the mentality that I'm finding, generational. It just is. How have you had to adjust a little bit of the way you coach, if you have adjusted, when you have younger athletes coming that do have a little bit of this mindset because they were raised on the everybody's a winner, everybody gets a trophy environment? How are you having to transition, if at all, your coaching strategy with newer athletes that are coming from this mindset?
Yeah. So in that regards, again, probably not the best person to answer it for two reasons. Number one, I am always evolving, so I got to figure out different ways because it doesn't always work. I'm not as relevant to the younger crowd that I was to the crowd, when I first started in my career, because I was so close to them in age. There was a cool factor, right? We listened to the same music. We knew all the same movie quotes. We knew everything that was going on in society based upon our kind of age ranges. Now there's a massive discrepancy between the cool factor of me versus the young athlete. So that's one thing. So I have to always evolve. The second thing that I would say is the reason why I don't think I'm the best person to answer this is because I don't work with people like that. When they're younger, I don't push. I basically provide opportunities, and if they want to do it, then I'm willing to help, because I believe when the athlete is younger, our job is to empower them and get them to be almost delusional about what they could possibly achieve. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't ever want to be a dream killer when they're younger. So I'm a big believer of, like, let's empower them by being honest, but by basically providing and developing confidence. When they're older, I'm not going to work with you if the thing that you want to accomplish is just something okay. Like, when someone comes to me and says something that's absolutely delusional, and I believe in them, I'm like, hey, let's go. That seems like a fun ride. That's going to be a cool story when we actually achieve it. Nobody believes us right now. Let's go make a run for it. That's worth it. The other stuff, not that exciting. Whether it be the NFL, Major League Baseball, kids that are going to get drafted, kids that would say, hey, I want to go, I want to make it to the Olympics, and I want to go and compete, and I want to get on the podium, and I want to go represent my country. That's a real conversation. And then you get people that are like, hey, I've played 8 years in the league. I want to go out on my own terms. So it's like, heck yeah, you know how hard it is. You know how hard it is to get to the top. You're at the top. Let's keep you alive. Let's keep you going. Let's make you've made enough money to retire and sit on a beach. Mm-hmm. And you still have the drive right now that you did when you were 20. I'll do anything for you.
Love that.
So I really only work with people that basically tell me, hey, Cav, I want to achieve this and you're coaching me. Because they understand that when I'm in the picture, the results are different.
Okay.
I don't get called for people to, like, I'm not a replacement and I'm not an option. Like, I put myself in a category that is so different than everyone else. Like, there's no such thing as convenience in my space. You're not working with me because of convenience. You're working with me because you want to win. And you're willing to do the inconvenient stuff so that you can achieve that and then you can go out on your own terms. So you're not, like, we're not in this conversation debating price, debating convenience, debating actions. We're in this because you're going to say, you want to achieve it, this is what it's going to take to do it. Like, I'm not here to motivate you. If you wanted motivation, you picked the wrong guy. Now, I can light a fire into your ass, but if I'm going to do that on a regular basis, I'm going to tell you, you and I aren't going to get along. Like, there's a tax for that. And if I have to waste my time motivating you, then I'm pulling away the effort to actually dissect and strategize the dynamic of our situation to give you the best coaching possible. Do you want my time spent motivating your ass? Or do you want my time spent putting you in the best position for you to win? You decide. Because there's only so much bandwidth a single human has.
I love that. And the next question that I'm gonna ask is almost like a mix from being a parent yourself and from being a coach to professional athletes. Do you see any common denominator from your experience on the upbringing or the type of parents that an athlete has and the outcome that they have as, you know, maybe their work ethic or how they perceive themselves? Have you seen any common denominator that you've observed? Obviously anecdotal, but like anything that you have noticed?
Absolutely. Like when you look at anyone's success, whether it be an athlete, an entrepreneur, executive, or in any category in life, I truly believe that there is destiny attached to like their genetics, right? And then there's also the parent. And I think the parent has probably the greatest influence in their kids' lives by allowing things to be in it. So for instance, the parent determines what environment their kid grows up in. And they've chosen saying, hey, that's acceptable. When they get into an environment where like that's not acceptable, they take them out of it. For instance, you know, I graduated from a private school because when I wasn't in a private school, I hung out with an environment that was probably not in my best interest. And for me, I think my brother was really pissed off because he was on a trajectory, you know, in sports and in his area where like they were going to be really at a high level. But he was also on a trajectory that it was dangerous, right? And for me, I was on, like, when I was in that environment, probably not the environment that my parents wanted me to be in. So they took me out of that environment for a reason, right? Some things that you have to think about as a parent, if you want your kids to be successful, is to make sure that you control the environment, number one. And then number two, you need to make sure, or I would say highly, highly recommend that if you control the environment, that you find a way for your kid to be successful in the environment that you put them in. So if the environment is healthy for them, then train them through it. Don't put them in an environment where they're always the best, and don't put them in an environment where they're always the worst. Navigate where they are based on the stages of their life. So I'll give you an example between myself and my brother. So my brother's 3 years older than me. When we played sports, my brother played at a club that was outside of our local town for where he is. When I got to the age where I was able to play in that same, you know, organization, I started playing. I was there for one day. I was the best kid there. My dad grabbed me and said, "Oh, you're playing right by the house because that's where you belong." And he dropped me, but he made it more inconvenient for him as a parent for what was best for me versus what was best for my brother. So he created an environment just for my brother, and he created an environment that was just for me so that we both could be in environments that were going to challenge us. I went from being the best athlete in one organization to be like almost like the third worst in another one. And I very quickly found my way to the top percentage in that organization because that was what I was made of. But if I would have stayed in that other place, I would have stayed the best. There's no doubt, but I wouldn't have improved at the rate of improvement I did when I would have moved. And I think when you think about having siblings, so Thomas is my only son, and his comparison is going to be different. It's going to be a social comparison, right? Whereas for me, I always had an older brother to compare. My parents never gave us the same rules. Like there was never a rule for both of us at the same time and that we always were the same. Like it was completely what most people would say unfair. He had a standard and I had a standard because I wanted something different in my life. He wanted something. So they correlated their rules around how he was going to act around what he wanted to achieve. And I said I wanted to achieve something. So they held me accountable to what those standards needed to be. So you learn really, really quickly that life's not fair.
And I have a follow-up question on that because I love that you're talking about manipulating the environment and create that, that environment, putting the child in an environment that is kind of like, it's not so good that they feel like a failure day in, day out, but it's not so inferior that they feel like they're hot shit, like a big fish in a small pond. How do you see with athletes? Because, in America, there is a big culture of pushing your kids to do sports. It's sometimes sports that the kids don't even want to do, but it's kind of like the dream of the parent. How are you finding as you're getting athletes, out of college and things like that, the mindset of these athletes whenever they come to you, if they started the sports because their parents want, not because they wanted to?
Yeah, I think that a lot of parents do live vicariously through their kids, and they're trying to relive the glory days that they didn't achieve. And they go back and they go like, I would have done it different. I was this, I was that, but I would have done this. So I'm making sure I give that to my kid. But the truth of it is that's your kid. That's not you. And you missed out on that. So the lesson that you're giving your kid is a lesson that he's not going to learn because you're trying to force it. The reason why you learn that lesson is because you actually chose not to do those things over time. And that's a reflection. So you're actually robbing him from the chance to learn the lesson that you now know as an adult. So every parent that lives vicariously through the kid, I look right at him and I say, hey, is that what you're trying to accomplish? I think that's so admirable. I think that as a mom and as a dad, I think that's incredible. I think what you're doing is exactly what I would want to see a parent do. But you're robbing them from that lesson by you trying to create it because that doesn't create that. Let's talk about that. Do you ever learn something that and take it to heart when it's not you, when you're not involved, when it's not associated with you?
Nope.
When when the issue is associated to someone else, do you understand the punishment? Do you understand the depths of the actual responsibilities that took place if you're not the one that's on the chopping block for that? Of course not. So what you just did when you do that with your kids is you're creating an environment to where they no longer are ever accountable because you are constantly creating this for them. You're robbing them from that lesson.
This is beautiful. Oh, this is so powerful. I love that. So, Cav, let me ask you this. Is there anything that Can we
just pause the moment that Miss Olympia called me beautiful? I just want to pause the moment.
No, I didn't call. I said that it is. I said it is beautiful. Pipe it down.
Okay.
Pipe it down.
I was excited. The Cuban Irish in me was getting pumped. That doesn't happen often. That doesn't happen all the time.
Oh, I'm deceased. So, is there anything that I didn't ask that you find that it is a big, that you'd like to talk about, that you find that it is important to complement the conversation that we had today?
Yeah, I think that whatever you believe can be true only if you believe it enough to take action yourself. So James 23 says, faith without work is dead. Your dreams are dead if you don't work. But they start with faith, which means you have to internally believe that you have the power gifted by God and your family and your environment, and everyone's going to support that. Even if they don't support that, that's true. You believe it, you could achieve it. But don't think for a second that you're going to move an inch if you don't put the work in. It doesn't say, it doesn't say your faith is enough. It doesn't say that, you could achieve it if you believe it. It says the goal of your life, of your faith, of what you vision, and what you see, is dead. It doesn't do anything. It's zero if you don't put the work in. There is nothing attached to anything that you could appreciate in life that you will gain and have in something that's given to you if you don't put the work in. So for all of you that don't know if you could achieve it or not, then number one, start with a vision. And then next thing you do is start working towards that. If you don't have a vision, like you're just going nowhere fast. You're just on a treadmill. You'll burn a lot of calories, you do a lot of work, but you'll be in the same spot. So the result will be great, but it won't actually get you anywhere. If you want to achieve something, you have to very clearly know where you want to go. And then after that, you better start working. Just who cares if you feel like shit? That's the reason why you're doing it.
Mm-hmm. Going nowhere real fast. That was like the best. I think I love this, like going nowhere fast, because that is kind of what I see. Even obviously now we do work with some pro athletes, but it's more on the physical, like the aesthetics kind of side of things. And it's interesting because people just want to like, I want to give results, but they don't even have clarity on what results are. So I love that you mentioned this. Cav, last question for you, and this one is a fun one. What has been the favorite place that you've ever been to? Your favorite trip? I know you like to travel, so I thought that was a fitting question for you.
Italy. I went with Tanya to Italy last year for her birthday, and it was unbelievable. So much so where I actually flew there just for one day just to go back because I had a layover. I had an early morning layover, and I went all at night and I went back. So yeah, Milan was by far my favorite spot. Second to that, I would say Dumaguete, where our office is in the Philippines, is unbelievable. And then third is Tokyo. Those are 1, 2, and 3.
Oh, I love Tokyo. Tokyo is my favorite city, hands down. Like, it is magical, that place. I love it. I love it so much. Cav, thank you so much for being here with me today. I know that I had to fight all these like important Olympic athletes to get their hands off of you so you could be here today. So I appreciate you here. Can you tell our listeners where they can find out more about you, where they can get your book, reach out to you, learn a bit more about what you do? Now's your time.
First of all, thank you so much. We are in Olympic prep, so we're going to get ready for Olympics in Paris. So I'm super excited about that. And easiest place to contact me is Instagram. I like to see, a day in a life. So I live most of my stuff there. So reach out to me. Just say that you're a friend of Melo in the podcast, and we can go from there. If you screenshot your review of what you learned in the podcast as you leave it on iTunes for her, then I might give you a surprise. And then athletehq.com would be where the website is. You're welcome to do that. If you are a business owner and a brand and you're trying to build a website and build an online presence, Sites at Scale is our web presence business. And easiest place to reach me is Instagram. And then those are our 2 websites.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All the links that he just mentioned are going to be down in the show notes, so you don't have to be writing stuff down. I'm going to put it all there. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next week. Thank you so much for tuning in this week. But let me ask you, what was your aha moment in today's episode? I would love to know. You can leave me a comment or voice message at the link in the show description. You can also follow me on Instagram and let me know what topics you want to hear more about or who I should have on the show. As for today, this is it for today, guys. I'll see you back next week for another episode of the Unfiltered Fit Life podcast.